Lyra Hales stood in the doorway of what had once been her meticulously organized pantry, staring at the chaos before her with a mixture of disbelief and exhausted resignation. Jars of spices sat next to cleaning supplies. Dried pasta had been relocated 3 shelves down from where it belonged. And somehow her coffee beans were now stored beside the motor oil. "Vori," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone of strained patience that every human guardian throughout the galaxy seemed to develop within their first week. "Vori, can you come here please?" The young Craxian padded into the room on all fours, their 4 eyes blinking in innocent sequence. Vori's fur, a deep purple that shifted to silver at the tips, was still fluffy with youth, marking them as barely past their 3rd molt. Behind Vori came 2 more cubs, Jest and Morrow. Their ear tufts perked forward with what Lyra had learned to recognize as poorly concealed pride. "Yes, Guardian Lyra." Vori's translator rendered their chittering speech into perfectly polite standard. "We have completed the organization task you assigned." Lyra pinched the bridge of her nose. She'd made the mistake of casually mentioning, that the pantry needed organizing while she finished her supply reports. She'd expected them to perhaps stack the canned goods or align the labels. She had not expected this. "Vori, sweetie, why are the protein bars stored next to the paint thinner?" All 3 cubs tilted their heads in perfect synchronization, a gesture Lyra had learned meant confusion rather than mocking. "They smell similar," Vori explained, as if this were the most obvious thing in the universe. "Petroleum base notes with carbon chains. We organized everything by scent classification, as is proper." "As is proper?" Lyra repeated slowly. "Yes!" Jess bounded forward, their tails swishing with excitement. "On Cruxia, all storage is organized by scent. It is the most logical system. You can find anything in the dark, even if the power fails or your optics are damaged." Lyra opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. The cubs watched her with those large, earnest eyes that could see into the infrared spectrum and detect prey at 300 meters, but apparently couldn't understand alphabetical order. "Children," she said carefully. "Humans organize by category and usage. Food with food. Cleaning supplies with cleaning supplies. But that makes no sense." Morrow's ears flattened in distress. "What if you need something quickly? How do you know where it is if you cannot smell it? I look at the labels?" The 3 cubs exchanged glances. Lyra could practically hear their unspoken communication. The poor human. So disabled. How does she survive? This was the eternal struggle of being a human guardian on an integration station. 3 years ago, the Galactic Council had opened its borders to humanity, a species that most of the galaxy had classified as oddly durable. Deathworlders with an alarming tendency toward adoption behavior. Within months, human volunteers had flooded integration stations across 6 sectors, offering to care for orphaned and displaced young from dozens of species. Lyra had signed up thinking she'd help a few kids learn to read. Instead, she'd become the sole guardian of 3 apex predator cubs whose homeworld had been evacuated during a stellar expansion event. Cubs who could hear her heartbeat from 2 rooms away, who could taste fear in the air, and who absolutely could not comprehend why humans insisted on organizing things visually. "Okay," Lyra said, summoning every ounce of diplomatic patience she'd learned during her council training. "I understand that you organize things the way that makes sense to you. And honestly, that's really thoughtful. You tried to help, and I appreciate that." Vori's fur rippled with pleasure. The cubs were terrifyingly good hunters, but they were still children who craved approval. "However," Lyra continued, "humans have very weak noses compared to Crocaeans. I can't smell the petroleum in the protein bars. I can't smell the similarity between coffee and motor oil. It's the alkane compounds." Just interrupted helpfully. "The alkane compounds," Lyra agreed, deciding not to ask how a 10-year-old knew more about chemistry than she did. "So we need a system that works for both of us. How about this? We organize things the human way, but we also create a scent map that you 3 can reference." The cubs perked up immediately. "A scent map?" Vori asked. "Sure, we'll put everything back in categories, but you can make notes about which scents are on which shelves. That way, if the lights go out, you can navigate by smell. And I can navigate by sight when I'm looking for, say, something to eat that won't poison me." Morrow's tail began to swish. "Could we make color codes too for the infrared signatures?" "Absolutely. We'll make it a whole system. A hybrid human Craxian organizational method." For a moment the cubs were silent. Then Vori stepped forward and pressed their forehead against Lyra's leg, the Croxian gesture of deep respect and affection. "This is why humans make good guardians," Vori said softly. "You don't just accommodate our differences. You find ways to make them strengths." Lyra felt her throat tighten. She knelt down and ran her fingers through Vori's soft fur. "That's what family does, kiddo. We figure it out together." 3 hours later, the pantry was reorganized. Food was grouped with food, supplies with supplies, and a beautiful hand-drawn chart hung on the inside of the door marking scent profiles, infrared signatures, and categorical locations in 3 different languages. It was chaotic. It was overcomplicated. It was absolutely unnecessary by both human and Cruxian standards. It was perfect. That evening, as Lyra prepared dinner, from ingredients she could now actually find, she found Vori showing the scent map to Ambassador Tsien, a senior Cruxian diplomat who'd stopped by to check on the cubs. "Fascinating," Tsien was saying, their translator crackling with interest. "I've never seen a hybrid organizational system before. The efficiency is remarkable. Guardian Lyra helped us design it," Vori said proudly. "She says that's what humans do, they adapt. They find solutions that work for everyone." Tsien's 4 eyes fixed on Lyra, who suddenly felt very aware of her flower-covered apron and messy hair. "Your species is strange, Guardian Hales," the ambassador said. "You come from a world that tried to kill you at every turn. You have weak senses, fragile bodies, and hilariously short lifespans. And yet you venture into the galaxy not to conquer, but to organize pantries and teach children that differences are strengths." Lyra shrugged, suddenly embarrassed. "Someone has to make sure they eat their vegetables." Tsien's fur rippled in the Croxian equivalent of laughter. "Indeed, and perhaps that is why the galaxy needs humanity. Not because you are the strongest or the smartest, but because you are impossibly kind." Later that night, after the cubs were tucked into their heated sleep nests and the station had dimmed to night cycle, Lyra stood in her newly organized pantry. She pulled out a jar of coffee, noting with amusement that the scent map listed it as alert beverage, brown warm ALKANE-compound-group-7. She smiled. Maybe organizing by smell wasn't so ridiculous after all.